The kids were already in their floaties, the cupcakes were on ice, and I was being told to get out of my own pool. HOA security stood at my gate like they owned the place, while Karen smiled like a queen reclaiming her throne. I hadn't even finished my drink. But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. I moved into Desert Crest Estates on a Tuesday. The sky was cloudless, the stucco glared back white-hot at noon, and the real estate agent handed me the keys with a confident smile and the sentence I would come to resent more than the closing costs. Great HOA here. Super organized. Organized was one word for it. By Thursday, I met Karen. Not a Karen. Not someone people called Karen as an insult. Her actual name was Karen Weller, and she was the self-declared monarch of the HOA, the board president, 3-term incumbent, a woman who held power like a chihuahua guards a chew toy, teeth always visible, posture trembling with territorial fury. I was outside adjusting my pool skimmer when I saw her approaching from the sidewalk. Capris, flats, a short-sleeved polo embroidered with DC HOA, board official in gold thread, clipboard in hand like it was a weapon. Her sunglasses were so big they made her face look like it was under surveillance. "Morning," she said flatly, her voice engineered for condescension. "You must be the new owner of Lot 7. I nodded, offered a friendly wave. "Yeah, I'm Jake." She ignored my hand. "That umbrella violates Article 3, Section 9. Approved outdoor furnishings must be HOA neutral tan. Yours is more parchment." I looked at the umbrella, then back at her. "It's beige." She lifted the clipboard. "Parchment. Beige reflects more sunlight, causes visual glare to neighboring homes." I blinked. Nobody can even see it from the street. HOA policies apply regardless of sight lines. There was no sense in arguing. The woman had brought her own laminated color swatch. I watched her hold it up beside the fabric like some fashion cop from a dystopian pottery barn. She wrote me up on the spot, an official warning slip and a friendly recommendation that I attend the next community decorum seminar. The whole interaction took less than 3 minutes. I stood there with the chlorine tablet still in my hand, staring at the paper like it was some absurd HOA version of a parking ticket. Fine. Whatever. I replaced the umbrella. Taupe, HOA approved. Even sent a picture to the contact email she scrawled at the bottom of the violation slip just in case she needed proof. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Next came a notice taped to my front door in bright blue font. Pool equipment noise after 7 o'clock p.m. Disturbance notice. My pool pump, which came with the house, which I hadn't touched except to turn on the timer. Then the string light warning. Potential for party simulation. Then the oleander hedge measurement. 2.75 inches above visual regulation height. And then, the one that made my jaw lock tight, excessive water displacement from pool activities may indicate unsafe or unregulated conduct. That was the day I realized Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was inventing them. I tried being diplomatic. I emailed the HOA, asked for clarification. I called the number on the violation slips. Voicemail. I left a message. Got a 1-line response 3 days later. All board decisions are final. Further escalation will result in formal action. Formal action? Over a hedge and a set of fairy lights? I started to notice other things. The way she lingered outside my property when she walked her dog. A wiry little poodle mix that barked like a smoke alarm. How she'd pause at the edge of my yard, slowly pulling her phone from her pocket as if preparing to document any leaf that dared fall out of line. I caught her once pointing her phone camera at my backyard fence from the sidewalk. I called out, "Can I help you?" She didn't flinch, just muttered, "Routine inspection," and walked off. The thing is, I hadn't signed up for this. The real estate brochure said low HOA involvement. I pictured trimmed hedges and newsletters about garage sales. What I got was an unpaid tyrant in pastel clothing who treated my backyard like an unpermitted construction zone. My pool had become the eye of the storm. It sat there, clean, calm, sparkling in the sun, while the war crept closer. Karen circled it like it offended her on a spiritual level. She hated that she couldn't touch it, that it was mine. And like all small people who crave control, she didn't come for it directly at first. She waited. She plotted. And eventually, she found a loophole that would let her do the one thing that turned all my mild irritation into full-blown war. She figured out a way to make me leave it, my own pool. But that comes next. It was Sunday. A dry, blistering Arizona Sunday with no wind, no clouds, and no mercy. I'd just sunk into the pool with a cold seltzer in hand, letting the water pull the heat off my skin. It had been a long week of invoices and back-to-back Zoom calls. I didn't want a margarita or a book or a playlist. I wanted silence, flotation, the hum of my pump in the background, and the occasional screech of a far-off hawk. I had 5 minutes of that. Then came the sound of shoes, not sneakers or flip-flops. Heavy, rubber-soled shoes, the kind worn by mall cops and authority figures who don't carry real weapons. I opened one eye. A man stood at the edge of my gate, hands folded in front of his belt, mid-30s. Neon yellow security vest, patch that read HOA Enforcement Liaison, as if that made him more than a guy hired from a temp agency to glare at trash bins. "Afternoon, sir," he said, flatly. "There's been a scheduling conflict. We're going to need to ask you to vacate the pool area until 4:30 p.m. I blinked once, slowly. "Come again?" He gestured at a clipboard. "Per HOA event use protocol, the pool's been reserved for a family recreation period." I laughed, a short, disbelieving breath that didn't quite come out as words. "That's my pool." Behind him, I saw them. Karen, in a wide-brimmed hat and matching mint sundress, standing just beyond the sidewalk with 2 kids in tow. Her sunglasses were off this time, eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to test her authority. One of the kids clutched a pool noodle. The other had floaties shaped like cartoon ducks. I turned back to the guy. "This is a private residence. You can't schedule my backyard." "The HOA calendar lists a community recreation slot approved by the board," he said, not blinking. "Lot 7 did not respond to the online waiver for exclusive use exemption, which makes this area temporarily open to HOA-sanctioned functions." I stared at him, not because I didn't understand the words, but because I did. Every last one of them. A loophole. A bylaw buried in HOA jargon, resurrected and weaponized. And I had missed the memo. Karen didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just turned to the kids and said, "Give the man a minute to pack up his things." I felt something crack behind my ribs. I could have made a scene. Could have stayed put. Called the cops, even. But I didn't. Because I was too stunned to react. Too aware of what this meant. Not just the loss of my pool for the day, but the precedent it set. The idea that she could get away with this. That she could twist words, bend rules, and weaponize policy into personal playgrounds. I got out. Quietly. Toweled off in silence while the kids squealed about float races. Karen passed me at the gate. "Don't forget to RSVP next time," she said, like she was offering a friendly reminder. Her voice carried the same tone a dentist uses when they say you've been a little lazy with flossing. I didn't answer. I walked inside, closed the patio door, and stood there, dripping on the tile, fists clenched at my sides, jaw tight enough to ache. My own pool. Hijacked. Requisitioned. By a woman who had turned rules into a weapon and was only getting started. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about a pool. It was about power. And Karen had just made it personal. You don't start a war with Karen Weller by screaming. That's what she wants. She feeds on volume, outbursts, door slamming. The moment you raise your voice, you lose. So instead, I made coffee. Monday morning, 6:12 a.m. The pool was calm again. My property, empty. But my head wasn't. I sat at the kitchen island and opened my laptop like a surgeon prepping for a procedure. I started with the Desert Crest HOA website, a clunky mess of half-broken PDFs, misnamed links, and bylaws last updated in 2014. I read everything. Then I read it again. I made folders, printed documents, highlighted phrases. I learned how the board voted, how they passed resolutions, which articles had been amended, and which still lived in the original architectural guidelines from the subdivision's founding. There were 217 pages of HOA regulation, zoning, and procedural policy. I read every single one. That week, I didn't watch TV, didn't go out, just worked, slept, and memorized the legal map of Desert Crest Estates. By Friday night, I had 6 binders, labeled, color-coded, annotated. One tab read, pool use. Another, lot designations. Another, exclusive rights. But the real breakthrough came when I dug deeper, past the HOA's internal documents into the county archive. I filed a public records request for the original development plans of Desert Crest, going all the way back to 1992. They mailed me 2 thick manila envelopes. Inside were hand-drawn parcel maps, builder contracts, zoning approvals, and a letter from the original subdivision contractor referencing something I hadn't seen in any HOA document. Lot 7, owner-retained recreational zoning, non-communal, not subject to shared use covenants, my lot, my pool, not shared, not schedule eligible, not included in community amenity structures. Somewhere along the way, that distinction had been quietly forgotten or deliberately buried as the HOA expanded its reach. Karen either didn't know or had bet that no one else would find it. She bet wrong. I copied the clause, cross-referenced it with the county plat, pulled satellite imagery, circled every detail. What started as an emotional response became something else entirely. A system of proof, of leverage, of chess moves planned 5 turns ahead. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about precision. This wasn't some neighborhood squabble. This was a power grab dressed in paperwork and pastel. Karen thought she'd won because I walked away once. She hadn't noticed the difference between submission and strategy. And while she scheduled her next children's swim hour, I was preparing something much quieter, much colder, something with teeth, not fury, not fireworks, just the sound of paper slicing clean through a crown. By the time the next community pool event rolled around, I had the entire playbook memorized. Karen had scheduled it for Saturday, a children's social swim, open to all HOA members and approved guardians. The flyer, taped to the neighborhood mailbox, had a cartoon dolphin on it. My house wasn't mentioned by name, of course, but the address was listed clear as day. Lot 7, my property, my pool. I didn't post a rebuttal, didn't file a complaint, didn't even bother showing up to the HOA meeting 2 nights before, where the board voted, unanimously under Karen's guidance, to confirm recreational use designation on Lot 7 pending waiver in action. Let them vote. Let them think I'd gone quiet. I hadn't. What they didn't know was that 2 hours before the meeting, I'd filed a cease and desist letter with the HOA's legal counsel, complete with certified delivery and time-stamped attachments. I had also filed a formal grievance with the State HOA Regulatory Review Board, citing overreach, unlawful enforcement of shared use clauses, and repeated harassment backed by 6 separate documented violations. It was boring work, unsexy, legalese buried in sub-paragraphs. But that's how you win wars in neighborhoods like this, not with fury, with footnotes. Saturday came. I stayed inside, watched from the upstairs window as Karen arrived 20 minutes early in her seafoam green minivan. The back was full of plastic tubs, snacks, pool floats, maybe a folding table or two. She wore a powder blue visor, a matching tank top, and a whistle hanging from her neck like she was coaching the Olympic trials. By 10 o'clock a.m., a dozen kids and a scattering of parents stood outside my gate, but the gate was locked, and this time there was a new sign hanging on it. White background, black letters. Private property. Exclusive recreational rights retained by lot owner. HOA access prohibited under ARS 4033-6. Trespassing will be documented. Karen read it twice. Her lips moved both times. She rattled the gate, turned to the parents, tried to explain something, gesturing toward her clipboard, her laminated calendar printout, even her phone, but no one moved. The kids shuffled in place, confused. That's when I stepped outside. Button-up shirt, jeans, clipboard under my arm. Calm. Karen turned, smiled like it was all some kind of misunderstanding. "We had this approved last week," she said, her voice rising with false friendliness. "You didn't respond." I held up a folder. "Here's the original zoning designation for Lot 7, signed by County Records in 1992. I handed it to her. "This," I continued, flipping to the next tab, "is the cease and desist letter issued to the HOA's council. You're all in violation right now, Karen. Every parent here was misled. This isn't a shared-use property. It never has been." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "This," I said, pulling out the third packet, "is a copy of the formal state grievance, which I've just delivered to your board. Section 3, Paragraph 5 covers personal liability for board members knowingly enforcing invalid statutes. That includes you." Her face changed slowly, first confusion, then defensiveness, then something closer to fear. I turned to the parents. "I suggest you all go home before this becomes something you didn't sign up for." And just like that, they started leaving. Quietly. One by one, avoiding her eyes. Some nodded to me. One dad muttered, "Didn't know it was your house." I didn't answer. Karen stood there a moment longer, clutching the paperwork with one hand and her pride with the other. Then she turned, visor low, and walked back to the van. She didn't look back, and I didn't smile. Because this wasn't over. Not yet.